You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, Episode 2.
You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, the show created for women 40 and beyond, ready to shake things up. Get exclusive access to expert advice, support, and strategies that will inspire, motivate, and give you the tools to not just survive, but thrive. And now, your host, Jackie McDougall.
Welcome to the 40 Thrive Podcast. I am so grateful you're here. I know you're busy. I know you have a lot going on, but the fact that you committed to yourself and your own growth and well-being and self-care, that's awesome. And I really appreciate it. If you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you're a woman over 40 who's tired of the status quo. Maybe you feel like you're ready to take action. You are ready for that better life, but you're not exactly sure how to do it. This podcast has been specially created just for you. I founded the 40 Thrive community because I'm dedicated to connecting women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s with the resources they need, that we all need, to live life on our own terms. Before we get started with today's episode, I invite you to head on over to 40thrive.com and download your free tips to thriving today. Thriving doesn't need to be all or nothing. The tips there will help you take baby steps toward a more purposeful and fulfilled life. Head on over to 40thrive.com for your free tips to thriving today. All right, let's get started. Today's episode is a good one. I mean, really good. If you've been feeling like your sex life is in a rut, or maybe even non-existent, this is the episode for you. The only request I have is that you check that judgment at the door because you will learn so much from our guest today. Recently, 40 Thrive co-hosted a live event called the Self-Care Project. During this event, we hosted a panel called Pleasure as Self-Care, and it featured some incredible sexual health experts. One of those experts was the outspoken and super funny Wendy Miller. Wendy is an Emmy award-winning producer and writer. She's worked with NBC, Lifetime, and even the Oprah Winfrey Show. As head of programming for Playboy TV, Wendy was the creator of hundreds of hours of premium sex-positive programming for couples. It's because of that role, Wendy is now a board-certified sexologist and sexual wellness consultant. She's currently writing a memoir about her years as head of programming for Playboy TV. I cannot wait to read that one. Wendy Miller, welcome to the 40 Thrive Podcast.
Thank you. Let's get dirty. I think that's my new tagline. Actually, I don't know.
Let's get dirty.
Let's get dirty. I was talking to a couple of people who were there, and it was such a fun event. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome.
I wasn't planning on it. I thought you just wanted somebody who was smart, and apparently you got me instead. So. You know what?
I want to cut you off for a second and actually because I reached out to you because I've known you for a while, and I said I need somebody who is a sex expert. And you, having worked at Playboy TV as the head of programming for a million years or 7.5, one or the other, you had recommended so many people to me. And the more we would discuss, and the more you were like, this one is good because of this, and this one is good. I thought, my God, she knows so much. She is, the over 40 crowd, a mom in the suburbs. So there was some light bulb moment. My aha moment was with you, Wendy, that I just thought these women, because we had 2 doctors also on the panel, that I thought these women would really respond to your messaging. And so you were the expert. And I have to say, it was one of the most brilliant decisions I made that day.
I thought the salmon was really good that day, too. That was another decision. I was really happy to be there. And thank you for those kind words. It's really great for me because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. So when I'm sitting next to them, I don't feel as if I need to fulfill that, I don't need to check off that box because I can't check off that box and I'm not going to. If there's one thing I know, it's myself, and I don't want to pretend to be something I'm not. And so I was in a perfect situation. You produced that panel so well because you had you had a physician, you had a sex therapist, and then you just had me. And I basically represent most of the women in this group because I'm menopausal and I'm, early 50s and I have been through it. I've got a kid. And I think people really relate to me because I'm just like them. And that's what's been really working for me.
Well, I think that that's definitely why people responded to you, because as much as we want to look to medical doctors for some of the stuff, when even the women there who would talk about hormones or their lack of libido and things like that, it's not all about the physical changes of our bodies. There are so many other things going on. And so for you to kind of come out of the gate with, first of all, being hilarious and letting people realize that it's not that serious.
Oh my gosh,
and it's
no.
actually so much more fun and playful if you let yourself go there. But I think that people really related to your messaging.
Quick question. What is it? Is this like a PG convo? Can I say things?
This particular episode cannot be PG. So have
cannot.
at it.
Okay. Why is it?
I will have, because I just don't think that we can talk about this in a way that is effective and impactful for these women.
Great.
If we're just trying to sugarcoat everything.
Great, because that's really important. And, I think when those women raised their hands and asked questions at that event, and they're sitting among 50 other women, and when somebody raises her hand and talks about some sexual dysfunction, some problems, something that she's worried about, that takes a lot of courage. And so it's really important for me never to be judgmental and just listen and, diffusing it with humor. It's just so helpful because we need to separate the shame from sexuality. We just do. And this is the problem that, as women, we're raised, first of all, you're told, don't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex. Then basically we are made the sort of the keepers and the protectors of male sexuality, right? So not really so much the keepers. Like we're supposed to decide when men have sex. Like we're the gatekeepers there. And it's all about, don't have sex. But if don't have sex. You got to make sure he doesn't have sex with you. And it's like there's nowhere in there that has any talk about pleasure. And really, for women who are sexually active, the first 10 years or so, it's all about what guys want. And there's no education about what women want. And I'm pretty sure guys don't care at that point. Some never do. And when I was at Playboy and I started surrounding myself with all these incredible sexual educators, the first thing I did was I'd have these parties at my house where I'd bring in my friends from school, all the moms from school, and a sexual expert, and to teach them, techniques or whatever. And for the blowjob class, it was standing room only. There were over 40 women in my living room listening to Nina Hartley teach a blowjob class.
Wow.
I had a cunnilingus class in my house. Another great phrase that should be in my epitaph. I had a cunnilingus class at my house. 5 people showed up. What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
Oh, see, you're absolutely right, because I don't even think I even heard anything about even female masturbation until I was well into my 20s.
Totally.
It wasn't something that, I didn't necessarily grow up in a place where you spoke openly about sex anyway, which I think is the norm. But
yes.
It certainly wasn't, I wasn't taught anything even in my early days of sex. It was never about me, right. in many ways.
And there's so much shame surrounding that because I think as women, we're naturally built to acquiesce, right? We are physically built to acquiesce. And so there's nothing in there that says, hey, wait a minute, hold your roll. Here's what I'd like. And so we grow up and we get married and we stay in these relationships where we put ourselves last. And we don't even think about what we want because we're about, serving and helping and being of service and whatever. And listen, I am a hardcore feminist. My husband does the laundry. I'm not June Cleaver by any stretch of the imagination. But still, there's always been a part of me that's kind of been like, no, this is fine for you. And then we'll figure me out second. And I don't know where that comes from because that's not who I am, and that's not how I was raised, and that's not how I live my life. But sexually, a lot of women, especially women over 40, seem to put themselves last in every category, including sex.
You're absolutely right. So what kind of attitudes do you find from women over 40 in regards to sex?
Well, unfortunately, women over 40 still have a lot of judgment attached to sex. And, if you talk to people in their 20s, like the concept of bisexuality or sexual fluidity, it's not even a thing. It's like it's not even a thing. But you talk about open marriage and you talk about whatever much more sort of different lifestyles for people over 40, women over 40, and you're going to get a completely different reaction. So the good news is that the young people are much less judgmental in figuring things out. And what we have to do is we have to help the people our age get to the place where we're not judgmental and we're open to trying different things or fantasies or even just having that conversation with our partners.
Yeah, you make such a great point, and I'm just wondering, where in history was it that you have this group of people, ourselves included, where we need everything to be defined? We couldn't even handle the idea of bisexuality growing up because it was like, well, which one are you? You have to choose a side.
Oh, I never even heard of bisexuality growing up. I
remember the first time I saw even a gay couple. I was, I think, 15 years old, and it was because we were on a cross-country trip. Let me rephrase that. The first time I saw an openly gay couple.
Yeah.
I was 15. We were on a cross-country trip, and I grew up in Boston, and we were in San Diego, and I was like, oh my goodness,
Was it two women in a Subaru? That might have been a giveaway.
But it was, they were just holding hands or something. It was completely
It could have been
benign.
European,
Well,
No,
that's
no.
true. That's true. But I just remember that there wasn't a lot of talk about sexuality. But where do you think that things started to change, that people are a lot more fluid and open?
Look, I wanted to look at how young people voted in the last election. Younger people are just more enlightened. And when you're looking at a lifetime of paying off college loans and you can't afford to buy a house and you're wondering if you're going to get a job, do you really think anyone's going to give a fuck about who someone else is banging? It's just meaningless. And I think also it has a lot to do with fewer people becoming members of organized religion. Because certain organized religions, are staunchly anti-gay. I mean, it is just the sin de la sin. And a lot of younger people are also not buying into that. And so what's happening is people are focusing on bigger problems in the world and realizing two consenting adults, if they want to have sex with each other, doesn't matter what sex they are. It doesn't matter if your friends have an open marriage or if they're monogamish or whatever. It just doesn't matter.
Let's go back to the women over 40, though. If we're so uptight or we're so judgmental or we need defined roles, how do we move into the next phase of our lives being sexually satisfied, but yet probably holding on to some of these uptight ideals?
Well, you've got to separate shame from sexuality. Sex, like a good sex life is it is a health issue. If you look at sex as self-care and a health issue, and you don't make it about who you're banging and if you're sinning and if you shouldn't be doing that and if you're making a bad decision, and you make it more about taking care of yourself, giving your body what it wants, and learning how to pleasure yourself, then you can move forward. But people are just sort of trapped in everything that they've heard over the years. And I'm lucky that I grew up in a super liberal house with no sex issues. So, I was never taught any shame around sex at all. And I'm really lucky, but I am not normal in every way, but especially in that way, because women just, women are pitted against each other all the time. And what that is about is if you make women fight with each other over looks and over bodies and over all sorts of things that don't mean anything, we will lose track of the real problem, which is, inequity in salaries and the glass ceiling and job opportunities. Keep women fighting over bullshit stuff, and we won't notice what our real problems are. And sex is on that list of the bullshit stuff.
Interesting.
There's so much shame and judgment surrounding sex. I like to look at my sex life as going to living spaces. If I want to redecorate my house, or if I want to buy new furniture at Design Within Reach, not that I can afford that, but if I did, I wouldn't be wondering what my friends are thinking. If I want to do something interesting sexually, if I want to try something, if I want to go somewhere, I don't care what people would be thinking. It just doesn't matter to me. And I think we're all caught up in that. Look at your sex life like buying a sofa. Do you ask for permission to buy a sofa? Do you worry what people are going to say? Oh, look, she got the 6 cushion in brown leather. Oh, people don't give a shit. Look at your sex life the same way. Own your sex life. Own it for your own pleasure and stop worrying what other people will think. If you're in a committed relationship, you and your partner need to work together to create something amazing together. And if you're worried about what your partner thinks, you're never going to get what you want. So stop caring what other people think and focus on your partner and how the two of you can create the sex life of your dreams. You can do it. I did it. It's terrifying, but then it's really fun.
Well, I think, there are people who may say, I don't really care what anybody else thinks, but at the same time, they can't necessarily talk to their partner, whether they've been together for 20 years or, I see a lot of my friends who, whether they go through a divorce or have new relationships, they have this kind of opportunity for a sexual awakening because they're not with the same person. Sometimes you get, just like in your parenting or other areas of your life, you start to kind of have these roles and then it's like, okay, how am I going to shake up this role? So what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's been with someone for 20 years? They've got kids who are maybe grownish and they want to spice things up, but they really don't know how.
There's a couple things you can do. First of all, it is scary, right? Because you're pretty much, okay, well, we've got this thing going and there's no problems. And, we have sex. It starts out where I do this and then he does that and then we do this and it's fine. That's okay. If that's fine. But if that's not giving you what you want, you have to start the conversation. I recommend you do not start this conversation while you are in bed, by the way. Go to a neutral location. Another thing is, there are ways to just sort of start talking to your partner without dropping a major bomb. And you have to be prepared to hear things. So you could say, hey, you know what? We've never really talked about our sex life. What do you mean? Like you might, you think might be what his answer is, but he might be like, okay, or she. So I think the first thing you have to do is just sort of check in with each other and say, look, my goal is to make this better. My goal is to have more fun. My goal is to stay with you. But I would like to talk about this and not have it be weird. Another thing you can do is if you really want to talk about something and it's pretty major and you're concerned that you can't really do it with yourselves, go to a therapist that specializes in this. It's a neutral ground. You'll have someone sitting there and you could say, hey, I want to check in on our sex life, but I think I would like to do it with a sex therapist. And, this is not me saying you're not good in bed. This is not me saying I'm not happy with you. Make sure the person knows that you're not doing this because, for some reason that they'll take personally. Set the record straight and then say, I would like to go talk to someone. Or you can just, there are books out there. There's a book called Opening Up that Tristan Taormino wrote. There's a lot of different books where you can start the conversation. But you have to be able to communicate. There was a woman sitting there who's been married for 20-something years who said that she was unable just to ask her husband for a basic thing that she wasn't getting sexually. And she'll never get it if she never says anything. And, as women, we have this thing where it's like when you're mad at your husband, you don't want to tell him why. You should know why I'm mad at you, right? Because we're such idiots. Well, he doesn't know why you're mad at him, and he doesn't know that you're unsatisfied in bed. Because chances are you're presenting as very satisfied, so you're not helping the cause. You're basically enabling a bad sex life. Right. So what you need to do is you need to woman up and say, hey, I'm feeling like I want to try some things, or I'd like to ask you if you'd be interested in trying this or that. Chances are he's just going to be really happy you're talking about sex and you're going to try to make things better. I don't think you're going to get too much of a problem. You might. I'm not a therapist, right. But I do know in my personal experience, asking for something is the only way you're going to get it.
I mean, that's just in life right there.
Right?
But, I think there are a lot of women. So one of the things I had to do before we had this panel was I had to reach out to women privately and get kind of their attitudes and their feelings. And I was sort of surprised at the overwhelming reaction, and not just of women who were going to this event, but in the 40 Thrive group on Facebook, that it was like they were sentenced to a missionary style, boring, run of the mill sex life because that's what they had.
Yeah.
Since maybe they say, oh, I remember when we first got together, things were interesting, but ever since we got married, or maybe we had kids, or, there are some very real issues that come up as far as dryness with women and less lower libido or less intense orgasms and things like that. And so, some of those things are physical, and it's talk to your doctor and be direct, and maybe there's some assistance, but not all of that is physical. And so Can you speak to that a little bit, where women are just settling because they feel like that's it. This is what my body's doing. This is what my husband or wife or partner is doing. And I just have to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, don't upset the apple cart, right? And I think as women, we naturally put ourselves last. But, there's nothing wrong with asking for what you want or starting this conversation. And I really think that you can get into a sexual rut for 10, 20, 30 years and not even know it, because you've basically been told that there's nothing else out there for you. Also, when you have a kid, like a part of your brain goes, I can't be a whore anymore. I'm somebody's mother. I can't have like sexual urges. I can't be a freak. There's a 4-year-old in the other room that I'm in charge of now. Well, you really can do both. You can silo things, and you can have your parenting top level, and you can have your personal sex life top level. They're not, one does not cancel out the other. And I think as women, it's like you push a kid out of your vagina, okay? Already you're like, oh my God, I feel like garbage. And then if you breastfeed, it's like, well, these things don't belong to me anymore. It's like your body basically becomes someone else's, clearinghouse. And you have to get that back. You have to take that back, and you have to take back your sexuality. And there's a lot of trauma that we all have to deal with as women. Basically all day, every day, we are triggered and have microaggressions every single day. And it's just really hard to take that back and to own it and be like, okay, I'm going to separate this sexual trauma or this problem with my desires. Because they can coexist. You just have to uncouple them. Right. And so I think the problem is, I remember one day I was leaving work, and I was talking to some woman or something, and she said, you know what? You have it all. And I said, what? She's like, you have it all. You have a career, you have a husband, you've got a kid, everything's working, you have it all. And I looked at
I love your impression of her, by the way.
Right? And I was like, I don't have any toothpaste at home, and so I don't have it all. And why do we have to have it all? Why do women have to have it all? Do you think guys have to have it all? Do you think a guy has ever said to another guy, wow, dude, you have it all? No, it's just another thing that's placed on women to make us judge ourselves so we don't pay attention to the real problems that are happening to us. It's all a distraction. Don't buy into that. Don't judge yourself. Don't judge your sexual desires. Don't judge your sexual fantasies. Just accept them and wallow in them and use them. And don't think because you have sexual desires or sexual fantasies, there's something wrong with you. There isn't.
Well, you've been leading, sex education seminars, and you've been a sexual wellness consultant. So what's some of the advice or direction maybe you've given people that you have seen has opened them up to a different life when it comes to sexuality and their relationship?
Yeah, so a lot of women that I work with are dissatisfied with their sex lives. And for them, that's sort of like status quo is bleh, which makes me so sad. And so the first thing I do when I work with them is I try to get them to finally admit what they really want. And it takes a long time. I mean, Look, if you're shopping on Amazon and you're looking for a black jacket, there's like 500,000 black jackets you have to weed through. It's overwhelming, but at least it's socially acceptable. Now imagine you're trying to choose what kind of sex stuff you want. And all of it has been, stigmatized, and there's so much judgment attached to it. And it's like you can't walk into the pleasure chest, and you can't even touch yourself without feeling like garbage. It's really hard. So I work with a lot of women, and I try to get them to finally say what they really want. And it's usually not a big deal. Some of it is just, I want my husband to be this, or I'd like if we tried more adventurous things, or I'd like to just go to a sex club. I don't want to be with anyone else, but I want to be around swingers, or whatever it is. And it's so hard for people to admit it. And eventually, after a lot of poking and prodding in a non-sexual way, I get them to admit it. And then you can start making steps towards that. But you don't get what you want if you don't know what you want, right?
Right.
And it's hard to admit it if it's sex stuff.
But one of the things that I like about you, though, is that you talk about, you've done programming where you are seeing swingers, or, you're in the house with them, and you're creating scenes around it, and, a variety of different, I'm so clueless that I can't even come up with other examples. But one of
lots
the things
of good, fun, dirty stuff.
But one of the things that I like is that you don't say to couples or to women that you talk to, you should go and be a swinger. You should go into a sex club and participate. You have a lot of advice that is just kind of like the baby steps into maybe having a more interesting sex life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I would be the world's worst consultant if I said to someone, hey, why don't you just do this thing? It's like, you can't go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds unless you're in a Tesla. It's like you've got to take this step by step. You've spent 30 years having a cruddy sex life. You can't all of a sudden go to a kink club and get flogged by 10 people. You have to take baby steps. And some people enjoy seeing that and enjoy the idea of being part of that, but would never feel comfortable in that situation. And so I work with them to come up with creative solutions. Of course, maybe you're really into kink and you like watching, BDSM porn, and that's really exciting to you, but there's no way you would ever do that. Okay, maybe there's a way to create a different type of version of that in your house, in your bedroom, that works for you. And so it's first about admitting or being, understanding what you want, and then taking tiny steps. Because people who are, like the swinging lifestyle is great for a lot of couples, but it is also an easy way to blow up a marriage fast. Because if your marriage is kind of like on shaky ground, becoming a swinger is not going to fix that. Having sex with other people is not going to fix the fact that you still don't like to have sex with your primary partner. So, that's just going to blow up fast. So introducing other people to your relationship is not the solution, especially if your relationship is on shaky ground. It's just not. Right. But there might be other solutions for you. And the first thing you need to do is decide what you want. And you have to be able to communicate what you want to your partner at some point.
Well, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who feels like they've never been down this road, that they have no idea what they want? Because that's the other thing that the feedback I got were women who were, this sounds great. I would love to have a much more meaningful and satisfying relationship with my spouse. However, I've never, they've been together since right out of college, or it's their first, high school sweetheart, whatever the reason, they've never had that sexual awakening before this relationship. So how do you go so long with just kind of status quo? And then how do you figure it out?
It's not that difficult, because I do some public readings of my memoir. I'm working on a memoir about my 7 years at Playboy TV. And oftentimes when I'm done, people come up to me, and you know how people come up to you to ask you something, but they really want to ask you something else.
Yes.
Right? So people be like, hey, I really liked your memoir. It was great. Oh, thank you. So, and it's like kind of like looking around. I'm like, just ask me the question. And sometimes it's hard just to ask the question. But if people are talking to me, if people are reaching out to me, they already recognize there's a problem, right? And just reaching out to someone is a great first step. So you might not be able to vocalize it, and it might just take some time for me to talk to them and see. But yeah, you can be in a marriage, you can be in a relationship for 20 years that's kind of blah, and both of you can be like, hey, let's try this. And if you're together and you're supporting each other and you're doing it ethically and honestly, you can take your relationship to levels unimaginable. Everybody is leaving so much fun and pleasure on the table. That's a fact. People are leaving so much fun and pleasure on the table. And there's a lot of stuff you can do as a couple that, some people are like, well, I don't want to go anywhere. What if my neighbors see me there? Blah, 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 blah. Your neighbors are there too. We were shooting a show about swinging, and I had to go to a swinger party, which was a disaster. And then the second year, we had a different director, and so we had to take her to another swinging party. And so, my husband is walking around in a suit and tie, like he looks like he's going to get a mortgage. And we're walking through this house, and I'm like walking the director through, because now I'm like a super experienced person, because I've like shot an entire year of a show about swinging.
You're like Norm at this place.
Right, exactly. And this woman walks right past us, right? And my husband turns to me and goes, she goes to the same preschool as us. She goes to the same preschool as us. And I go, honey, she's here too. Like, what do you think? She's going to run up to us in the parking lot of preschool and go, I saw you at that swingers party. No. So you can't be worried. You can't be worried about people recognizing you. And who cares anyway?
Right.
It's like, who cares? You are practicing self-care. You are working on your own personal health. If you have an awesome sex life, it translates into all sorts of different ways. Self-confidence, better sleep, more serotonin, more oxytocin. You are healthier if you have a better sex life. Period. So don't think of it as some sort of deviant behavior that a priest or Glamour magazine warned you against. Think of it as a way to enhance your marriage, have some fun, and be an adult. Just separate it from the judgment. I talked about how, this woman was like, well, I'm having some problem, blah, and I'm like, you would think nothing of spending $45 for a lipstick, but you would not even buy lube. So just think of lube as lipstick for your vagina. It's like women will buy everything because all we are is told that there's something wrong with us, so give us money, right? But not for sex stuff for some reason. There's like some sort of strange disconnect. So instead of spending $300 on a new pair of shoes that you might not need, why don't you go to a sex shop with your best friend and spend $300 there? And it's going to be a lot more exciting than a pair of shoes, at least to me anyway. Maybe.
Well, let's talk about some of those issues, because one of the things we did talk about at the Self-Care Project was the need for lube, and why there are many women who are, it's the strangest phenomenon. It's like, oh, I'm too dry down there. It's uncomfortable, but I'm afraid to go, like you're saying, and get some lube and bring it into the bedroom, like for some strange reason. So what are some of the common issues that women are struggling with, and what are some of the solutions that they can be looking into? You don't have to suffer. I think sometimes women take that suffering as a badge of honor. Like, oh, look, I suffered through it. Like whether it's parenting or labor. I mean, come on. We hear labor stories where it's like, wait, but I had it worse, Right. But we don't have to be suffering through sex.
No. And I just want to put this out there. I was in labor for about 4.5 minutes. I pushed 3 times and my kid came out. So, but here's the thing.
You're making it hard to like you, Wendy.
I know, right? Here's the thing. As we get older, our bodies change, right? And so you have to look at different solutions. Your OBGYN probably recommends lube. Mine is constantly trying to get me to use lube, because what happens is your skin on the inside of your vagina gets very, very thin. And if you don't use lube and you have pain during sex, you could actually tear your skin, and you could get an infection, and you can get a UTI. But all of these things are addressable. And lube is something everyone should be using. And again, your partner is not going to be mad at this. Your partner's going to be into it because it's going to make everything feel better. And you could apply some to your partner. Your partner can apply it to you. You could play around with different types of lube. Just think of it as like a fun thing to do. It's like you can just, instead of having penetrative sex, you could just lie next to each other and masturbate next to each other using different lubes just to see how it feels and talking to each other. There are lots of things you can do with products where, and actually that requires a lot of intimacy. Just to be lying next to your partner and masturbating requires a lot of intimacy. But it's a really fun alternative way to have a night of sex. And using different products and playing around with them together, you make a date out of it. It could be Friday night sex product night. And seriously, because, it's like if you're going out on a date, you could spend $60 on dinner, $50 on a sitter, blah, 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 $40 on an Uber, blah, blah, blah. You're several $100s. Or you can maybe get rid of the kids for a night and go to the Pleasure Chest together. Or I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep advertising the Pleasure Chest. I have no allegiance with
you
them.
live in LA. So for those who don't, that's a
go
sex
to a
shop.
go to a local sex shop together, buy some fun stuff, take it home, play with it, and just, explore. It's a really fun date.
What would and I think that we lose that playfulness in relationships anyway, in some ways. And
oh my gosh. And so many women at that group were afraid of vibrators because they thought their husbands would be offended. They think that their husbands will be threatened. That's like saying, honey, you could go outside and mow the lawn with a scissors, or I'm going to give you a John Deere tractor. It's like, of course he's going to want the tool that makes things easier, right? That's how those people operate. So by bringing a sex toy into the bedroom, it makes his job easier, and it pretty much guarantees that you're going to be getting off. So I do not believe that your male partners will be threatened by a sex toy in the bedroom. Although, as I said then, don't bring anything in that is bigger than him, at least initially. That's serious, serious advice. Do not bring in a 10-inch dildo if your husband has like a 3-inch penis. That's not going to make him feel too good.
Then it's competition.
Yeah, but, let him pick it out. How fun is that? Then he'll have some ownership. And really, stuff you could use together.
Absolutely. So let's address, though, the elephant in the room, because there are more than a few women who have revealed to me that they just have no libido. And so while spicing up the sex life sounds like a great idea in theory, they're just not there mentally. What would you say to them?
Well, there's certainly a lot of reasons why you can lose your libido. Age, stress, environmental. There are lots of different ways, having a house full of kids who are constantly annoying you and walking in your bedroom, lack of boundaries in the house. All of these things can contribute to a loss of libido. It might be physiological, which you should see a health professional, but it might just be that you've spent the last 25 years having shitty sex. So yeah, losing your libido is no big whoop. However, maybe you've lost your libido because you just sort of gave up. And maybe it's just something that you didn't make a priority because it wasn't satisfying to you. So if coffee stopped being delicious, you'd probably stop going every day and spending $4 at Starbucks or $5, whatever. I don't drink coffee. But, it's obviously not something that's giving you pleasure, so why would you devote any time to it? So you have to explore why your libido is lost and if there are steps that you can make to get it back, such as getting the kids out of the house for a night or checking into a really fun motel for the night or trying different products or just talking to your partner and saying, hey, I'm not judging you, but I'm just not getting what I want. And I'm as culpable as you. It's not your fault, because a lot of men will take that personally. And if you just preface it like, look, I swear this isn't your fault, but I think we need to kind of rethink this because it's become something that we don't care about. It's not a priority. And I would like to have a really fun, rewarding, and interesting sex life. And every 3 months, having sex for 5 minutes ain't doing it.
Right. I think there are a lot of women out there, too, who maybe don't have that. It's kind of like when you go to the gym and you have a really great workout and you're like, oh my gosh, why don't I work out every single day? I love it.
Right.
That I think sometimes, and I'm not a doctor, but sometimes we are not there because we have so many things going on in our heads, but we need to just kind of go there anyway, because then it will remind us of why we wanted to in the first place.
But imagine if you spent the first 20 years of your life being told, exercise is bad, don't exercise, you might get pregnant, don't exercise, exercise is for sinners, exercise, da-da-da-da-da. It's going to imprint.
Right.
Like there's going to be something in there in the back of your head that's going to make you think, oh my gosh, I better not be doing this. Oh my gosh, I better not really be expressing myself sexually because then I'm going to be a whore.
Well,
oh
and
my gosh,
the fact
people are judging me.
And the fact that they're doing it for the man. I mean, I remember that after, I'll be honest with you, after I had my first 2 kids, it was like sex for a good chunk of time was for him,
Right.
And you are absolutely right with that. It became something on my to-do list. Like it wasn't enjoyable. I had so many things to do. I had small kids. It was just exhausting. And so I can understand why some marriages don't make it through that period of time. Now my kids are older and now I can look at things a little bit differently, but that you're absolutely right in that for a big chunk of time and multiple times through our lives, sex is all about, pleasing him and making sure that he doesn't go somewhere else. That's the other message that we get.
Right.
If you don't give it to him, somebody else will. Like,
Right.
It's amazing.
Yes.
The messages
that's
that were sent.
Very common. That is so common. I hear that all the time. I think my husband's going to leave me if I don't have sex with him, or he da-da-da-da-da. Like, okay. But again, if you could look at making sex the same priority that you can as working out or getting coffee or getting your hair done. And that's as women, it's like we put all of these things aside. It's like so many women, it's quote unquote, let themselves go, right? Because they just stop taking care of things because it's like so stressful. You've got little kids, you're trying to run a business, you're trying to do everything in your life. It's hard just to, make things a priority that maybe don't seem to be as important as other things. Getting food on the table, getting my kids to school, making sure that everybody's at camp, making sure the laundry is done. These things seem really important. Everything in the house is sort of, running on this sort of plane. But there are other things. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you exercising? Are you meditating? Are you spending time taking care of your body? Are you thinking about what would make you happy? Because each of these things makes you a better mother. Having a better sex life makes you a better parent. Taking care of yourself, asking for what you want, advocating for yourself sexually makes you a better person in this world because it empowers you and it teaches you about asking for things that you want and will please you.
But isn't it a little bit crazy that we as women, we have to be told, go get laid because the world is better off if you do? I mean, that's literally what some women have to hear in order to go and be okay with pleasure.
Right, because we're all brainwashed into being, you got to have it all. You got to be the best mom, the best wife, the best career, the best. It's like we have been brainwashed into thinking that if we're not doing everything at the top level, we're failures. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is take care of yourself and everything else will be elevated.
You're 100% correct. Absolutely.
I'm not going to be the best mom. I don't want to be the best mom. I'm tired. I don't drive my kid to school. I don't want to drive my kid to school. I'm tired. That doesn't make me a worse person. It just makes me tired. So it's like, if I want something and I ask my husband, hey, would you be interested in, blah, blah, blah. It's like, that is good for our marriage because it's communication. If there's no communication, you're not moving forward and you're just in this sort of static sense of going nowhere. And you want to constantly be moving forward and evolving and growing as a person. And part of that is exploring what pleases you and taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. So what would you tell our single thrivers out there as far as, a lot of women are maybe not in a committed relationship, maybe not dating at all. They're just have given up on that side of themselves. What would you suggest?
Well, I think that there's a lot of trauma, right? Especially let's say you were married for 20 years and then you found out your husband was cheating on you and you get divorced. You think, as a woman, how does that make you feel? As you have to move forward from that. It's like you could be made to feel very inadequate. You can be made to feel, oh, maybe it was my fault. Maybe he didn't like my cankles and that's why he was banging his secretary. Maybe I wasn't good in bed and so that's why he hooked up with my best friend. It's like we make someone else's cheating about us.
Right.
And that's a trap. So the first thing you have to do is figure out how to move on from that. And it's hard because you might say to yourself, I'm done. I had a shitty sex life for 20 years of marriage. Now I'm single. I'm just going to be one of the red hat ladies and I'm going to go on cruises and I'm going to go hike, the Amazon and I'm just going to do whatever I want. And I don't need to have a sex life. Mm-hmm. I have a few friends who live like that, who are actually 100% asexual. And it's working just fine for them. So I think, I don't have a lot of specific advice for single people because I think you have a unique opportunity when you're single to be exploring anything you want, but it's hard out there. And I've been married for almost 30 years and, I can't imagine how challenging it would be to get back into that world and try to, reinvent myself and try to create, try to be in relationships or try to, have sex and try to hook up and try to have fun. I don't know how I would handle that. So I'm not an expert in that, but I would say that, this is a really good time to get to know your body and to go to different retreats and to really find out some people who are doing some really cool stuff in the world of sex and sexuality and take advantage of this freedom that you have to try as many things as you want. Because you don't have to be as a woman, you don't have to be in a couple to go to a sex club or to go to a resort or to go to whatever kind of, kink clubs or anything, anything you're interested in. Single women are welcomed all the time and usually get in for free. So everybody loves the single ladies in the world of sex. All the single ladies, very popular. They're all called unicorns. And so for their rarity and their special. So as a single woman, if you're interested in exploring more about the world of sex, you're in a great spot for that.
Right.
You just have to separate why you think your relationship fell apart and not make it because there's something inadequate about you. Because it's just not the case.
Such a great point. So what would you say, whether a woman is single or coupled, as far as finding some of these opportunities for exploring their sexuality, because people they want to go someplace reputable or they don't want to be knifed in the back, of the club. I mean,
I've never heard about anybody being knifed at a club.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like they want it to be safe and they want it to be something. Is there such a thing as reputable sex clubs?
Yes.
Or are they all created equally?
No. First of all, there are some sex parties that, these sanctum sex parties where it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to attend and you have to send nude photos of your body the day of and you have to be approved. I mean, there are some super fancy eyes wide shut style, sex parties. And then there are sex parties just for women to attend together. There are sex parties just for single women. There are sex clubs that are reputable. There are sex clubs that are, unique. And basically it takes some research or you have to find someone who knows about this world and not be afraid to ask them questions because they're not going to judge you. Whenever anyone comes to me and says, hey, I want to try, I want to go to this club or I'm really interested in this fantasy, as long as it's, consenting adults, I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to try to help you make that happen because I know that there's so much fun stuff out there that people could be doing. And I'm always happy to sort of be a sex shaman for them and to push them in the right direction, to show them places, to take them places, to suggest places. So there are places out there and you can find them. You just have to do a little research and ask people that might be leading more adventurous lives, find them and see if maybe they can help you.
Awesome. And so what about those people who aren't necessarily feeling that adventurous but want to spice things up? Are there products or resources that you swear by that they can investigate?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of things that you can do without even having to touch anyone else. So I knew this couple that was interested in having their first threesome, but they were both afraid and it was kind of weird. And, there's a lot of things that they couldn't figure out how to handle. So what I suggested to them was to just talk through as if there's a third person in bed with you. Commit to this fantasy. You guys are having sex and there's someone there with you. And talk through how that's going, how it is to be with her or with him, what they're doing. And it's a great way to experience a fantasy together without touching anyone and without worrying about STI testing and without worrying about going anywhere or being seen, and all in the safety of your own bedroom. So let's say you're excited and you want to go to a BDSM club, but you'll never set foot in a BDSM club because you're just a little bit too concerned about what that might mean. You can talk your way through it with your partner and really get deep into that fantasy. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And you're going to discover things about each other when you create a safe space to play in. And you might find out, oh my gosh, I had no idea that my husband was so into this or that my wife was so into that. And that's a super safe way you can explore your fantasies without going anywhere. And you might find out, that wasn't for us. Or you might find out, I'm ready for a club now. And so that's a great way to start things off.
That's a great point. I mean, you don't have to, like I said before, you don't have to jump in with both feet. If you haven't even been talking about your sex life, it might be a little bit much to add a third person or go to a sex club or wherever.
Yeah, and there are several books all about opening up your relationship or adding different things to your relationship. And basically, you and your partner can read the books together, and there's questionnaires, and there's just ways to go back and forth. You could go see a therapist. And I think a sexual therapist is really great. And it's an undervalued tool out there because you can go to a sex therapist and just say, hey, I want to ask my husband about how to do this, how to do that, whatever. And you will get some tools how to do that. Maybe you drag your wife or your partner in there and say, look, my partner doesn't want to be here. And your partner's sitting there across from you with their arms folded, whatever. But I want to have a better sex life. And it's not about him or her. And it's not about me. It's about us. And what are some things we can do that I don't blow up my marriage, but that I make it fun?
We could share some of those books and resources in the show notes for sure, because I think people will want to take that next step. Some people might want to take that next step.
Yeah, and they're just basic, there are basic questions that you can all write. And it's like, I think what you might find is going with your partner to a therapist, you might find out how much they really love you and care about you or attracted to you, and that they want to have a great sex life too. You might find that out.
It's all about opening up that communication.
Yeah, because again, there was a woman who was super brave and she raised her hand and she said, I can't get my husband to do this and I'm afraid to ask for it. Your husband would like to feel like he's a champion sex haver, right? Everybody wants to feel like the stud of all time. And so if you tell him, hey, I would really like it if you put your hand here when we did this, or if you did this more slowly, or if you spent more time warming me up because sex is painful, because that's another thing. Women in their 40s and 50s, we just need even more warm-up time. And there are tools you can use to get aroused, but you really need more lube, and he really needs to spend, or she really needs to spend more time getting you there. Otherwise, sex is going to be painful and hurried and not at all pleasurable for you, and just strictly presentational and something you do to keep someone happy.
Right. And that's when people just say, forget it. It's no longer for me. And I'll just do it every 3 months or 5 minutes, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, thank you, Wendy. I really appreciate your expertise and the way that you deliver. There's one question I have because I ask all of my guests.
All right.
What does 40 Thrive mean to you?
I think what it means to me is that there's a whole bunch of people out there just like me. And that I'm not alone in thinking, oh my God, what's happening to my body, or what's happening to my career, or, as a parent of young kids and with aging parents, you sort of get in this place where you might think you're alone. And so what I like about 40 Thrive is that there are so many other like-minded individuals who are sharing the same issues that we all have, that it's a great resource to ask other people questions, find out what their solutions are, and maybe share a couple of my own.
I need to hire you as my marketing consultant. That was amazing. So I really appreciate it. And so where can people find you if they have questions, if they want to reach out? Do you have social channels where it's okay for them to do that?
Well, yeah, you can reach out to me through my website at thewendymiller.com, and you can contact me through there. You can, ask me questions. You can talk to me about maybe you need some solutions. Maybe there's a way I can help you. Maybe there's some products I can recommend for you. I'm always happy to do that. And other people definitely reach out to me to say, show me how to make this happen. Show us how to make this happen. Again, I'm not a sex therapist. I'm not a physician. So, so it's like, I want to make that very clear. I'm just someone who's figured a lot of stuff out, and I know how to talk to people about it. So
Well,
if I can help, I can. Well, thank you very much.
Yes. And we'll have to have you on again, and definitely at the next live event. So people need to get their tickets for that.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. And the salmon was good too.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this chat with Wendy Miller as much as I did, and that maybe you're able to take her advice and spice things up. I mean, come on, life is too short not to be fun. Wendy has shared some resources she believes could help you in your quest for better sex. Check out the show notes for some books and goodies to help you get there, so to speak. Thanks so much for listening. If you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. The podcast will appear each week without your having to do anything. And if you feel inspired, I would love it if you'd share with a friend. You know the one. She needs to hear this episode. Send it to her and let her know you're thinking of her. Until next time, keep thriving.